take their pen out, they could, highlight a couple of things, and as a result of it, it's possible to be able to understand something more. Because one thing you would say, we all could see examples in the world where people are under a dead man statute, basically. A dead man statute comes along to describe what democracy is, because democracy itself is a system, and there's a public and a private that always has been. And in the public, you've got a democracy today, which you've got various ways that someone is selected to be to lead us. Okay. And if a party is someone who selects that individual, how did you and I do that? You see, there's issues, but also too where the electoral college is, because something wasn't popular or was popular, but it had to fit with the electoral vote, and that was the biggest one that counted. Where a lot of manipulation is, where you can see it, and then can any of these claims ever have been heard, which they're claims which can't be heard where in a system which is just going to do a pocket judgment, called a pocket judgment, meaning you're taking the right away of anyone, and you've taken the nature of the cause of action away. And there's no right to, because under the Sixth Amendment, your right exists right there to protect the security interests of everybody past the point where something was made from an issue which you have a counterclaim about because something occurred in the way you were dealt with, and now you have a claim about that. That's a counterclaim, and it's an actual an adverse counterclaim. And today, that's the topic a little bit. What's the difference between, just a counterclaim versus an adverse counterclaim? An adverse counterclaim is affect a lot of people because something was of an omission and something else is arisen quite a bit, matter of fact, as a claim because something was not noted properly and by error. And whether that was intentional or by the system, it's fraud. And it's called you having a piece of paper that right with the way that you've done something presupposes, of course, that you do have a adverse counterclaim.
And so we want the adverse counterclaim, or we don't? We want the regular
no, you're just seeing it like that because you're looking at the whole picture of what's occurred to you, or anyone else. So where somebody ran over your right, and you reserved your right, and you certainly was objected to something that went on. Could someone say that you allowed a separation of things to have some confessed judgment having occurred in someone's mind that you talked with and they never gave you any consideration? No, it's perfect and normal that people would give you consideration. And on the point being that somebody didn't give you consideration because you do have a remedy under the government to the maximal moment of all being that you can protect yourself, you have the use of and have the right to. And so somebody came along and said, no, you can't or couldn't, and they did that because there was something as a code which you didn't know about. Okay, so what's transparent about all of this? Not anything. In fact, if you were only listed as a decedent, meaning basically you're dead, somebody else has to speak for you, it's like you're a decedent, and a lot of money went on because something had to be probated about the issues. And this which we're talking about is people's homes, all that's real estate. You're the real estate. That's the sacred cow. That's not spoken about. That's traded. And there's fixed real estate of limited value, where you're the unlimited value as the principal in the matter of what went on. anywhere, in fact. So I'm just talking, keeping it simple as I can, and so you can listen, and our listeners can quietly absorb everything and not be taken by anything per se, and just to be hearing what the sense of something is. Simple. So one thing we said was, when you and I, we looked around, or anyone, it's like you ask who's in charge, and you think, well, I'm not sure. Yes, because who's in charge is more in the private, where you are in your own self. You don't want your stuff to be laundered and out there in the public, and you don't have to, where you have a private remedy that exists, and so, things which exist is in the private, it's not in the public. And so these are kind of things and issues which could help to be cleared up, because you've got two venues where anyone is, and someone's been taking the venue from everyone else, and that's under a demonocracy, really, where you're only a corporate body, the corporate self, as a utility company in a system which is communistic, under a dead man statute. And so all the issues, doesn't matter what it is, bonds were created. Your bond with us, we're our bonds together. And commercially, something was written as a note that relates to these bonds. And these bonds are, and the notes and all these things, is you're the one who can pay forward. You're the one who has that paid. You're the principal of the matter. It always has to come back to you. If something came out of your account, it has to come back to your account. And you have to be thinking in terms more like this if you're in the private, meaning that you're thinking about your own account more in a fiduciary manner versus in a democracy, you're letting that someone else consider that for you in a corporate self. And where these two jurisdictions, venue is mixed, you've got a right to select what the venue is. And if you didn't do that, someone selected it for you, and then you could have run into a lot of trouble where a pocket judgment was existed and a penny late and a day late. And all the equity that you put into something isn't existed, which it does. But if the nature of the event, like what we're talking about right now, the nature, how did this arise? Who is what? And do you know who is what in the picture? This is the nature of the circumstance of things. And only once you have the nature, now you can have a subject jurisdiction that relates to standing, which someone must have who's injured.
Okay.
And so, could you imagine that one side in the private is just operating more or less, and another side is operating on like what we're talking about, which is targeted, and rules exist for one lot, which isn't, which is available for the other lot, but many cannot know what this is. And so that of itself is kind of that is a monopoly, because the system itself can cause people to fall through cracks, and actual proper securities, which is made from all these notes, and comes to be, a currency, in fact, because it translates to something being transferred. Something moved as a charge. So just to get a background, of course, if you could see that someone doesn't have either ability to settle a claim, which you can in the private, but you don't know that you have this capacity to, you could see people being propagandized to have only some generalized sense of something and not be aware of what their right was, and things that could easily be used where you can see it, and those things can black swan a nation, though you can make conditions which would have occurred so that recruitment, for instance, to have defence force or something can't work because somebody did something to cause recruitment not to work ever, or for things to exist there to be weak. And so this is the asymmetric type of warfare which really has been going on. It's pennies on the dollar, and it's not boots on the ground. It's actually like a warfare going on where departments and agency and things and such like this can be all having been activated. And that's not anything you and I set up because we are supposed to have liberty being equal to each other, but where a job is offered to someone, it was open to them, but it wasn't open to everybody. It's like, that's not right. You see, our system doesn't work in common sense or common law this way. So what we just said, imagine lots of things went on, and all it was a pocket receipt. Yes? As far as a condition is concerned. And someone's life got taken over because of it. They could have been separated from their family, decisions made about their life, false sorts of things can have gone on. But what could somebody do by just having a page which has everything on it, and it's just one page? And in that one page, an idea exists that bonds went on, which is a saleable something from an emission that you could see it does exist, and everything that was sold about all the bonds that happened that were paying people behind the scene got on sold to those, and there was no real proper security behind it because it could be questioned that a dead man made a decision for you when you're not dead. You're not actually a actual decedent, but you're being treated as a decedent, you see? So with things that goes on like that, could you imagine the errors of omission and people's lands all being taken away? And I would say, wouldn't that be the biggest enemy coming up ever more? People being able to hold on to their land and having the ability to be able to understand what is evidentially flawed, which we're talking about. We're talking about something that's occurred, where it's evidentiary. You weren't given a proper procedure, and so under the Sixth Amendment, you've got protections, and everybody does for securities in government. So if everybody can see the purposefulness, could you think and imagine that some sort of overwhelming argument could have been, which is false actual, and not what this is, and that argument can have controlled, and so the nature of things like what we're talking about can have not been known or looked at, and that's like who and where is the principle in the matter, and shouldn't this be as charges discharged, because they're going to be anyway, and why should you be held in a manner that you've been shown to be belligerent when that what would be a reason for that circumstance, because you have a right to pay those things. It doesn't mean that fraud didn't exist. You've got a right to challenge things wherever that is. How much was their intention of fraud? Well, by the procedure itself, it can be fraud because it's evidentiary, because there could have been a challenge to the issue of the nature of things like what we're talking about. So you and I, we all could have been controlled because this administrative council, which is a Article 4 or 3 court or a King's Bench in various places, is what can help clear things up of a matter that's like this, and give issues to the legislators and people to assist to look at. Otherwise, where is anybody whispering in anyone else's ear to make public policy? It's not. Well, it is, but that's not coming more or less from where the people, you see, where you can. So if you could learn what this matter is about, becoming a page, a private waking in general, you're really learning how to conduct your whole life, really, and you're becoming more aware of a way to do things in the private and be able to approach things more in the private, more with confidentialness, and be able to resolve things quickly versus only being underneath a dead man statute, basically, which means that you've only been treated as a decedent, which in a democracy, you've got a form of this which takes a lot more away from people, and so you're only left with an abridged right as under a corporate self, and you can't be held under a corporate self. That's not lawful. But if you
Right.
but society and everybody could be being manipulated. I mean, this is the very reason why someone should have we all should activate what the fourth estate is. Otherwise, you've got this fourth generation type of warfare, which really is a warfare which is asymmetrically being fought more, and it's more for your mind. And so one hasn't, or one can, by listening to what this is about, you're becoming more aware that you actually really can be doing something about things, And so, what have we said so far? On your page, it would be, of course, that, what you're doing really is interrogatory, because you're privately, you've got an interrogatory notice. That's what it's called, an interrogatory notice, because it's connections between people, simple, in-house. And in-house, that's private. And what you do is confidential, it's private. And you have a right to do things in a matter like this, not in the public, because you're not a corporate being. And what's the process that you're doing? It's really an acceptance upon the consideration of proof of a claim having existed. How sweet and nice is this? You see, you're not arguing anything, which not a single thing, in fact. And why should you have to argue something which doesn't have to be argued? And this is what's beautiful about what this is. You're only focusing on the structure of something that occurred, and if it didn't happen in a proper structure, it doesn't matter what the content of that is inside that. You could fit anything into that. Today, people will be wanting to save their real estate and things, and they want to know how they can. And so that's very important, that you could know how to write a letter wherever anything is, one letter, and you can help clear the whole matter up, which you have a right to do, you see. So, and this is in the private. It's not something you're going to learn in the public. It's not something that is in the public. It's something which is somebody who's more knowledgeable of what's in the private, more they could be more assistant with where something is. But basically what we've said is you have an adverse counterclaim that arose. Why? Because the way that something went about was a procedure, and that procedure took away some natural right of yours, and that you have a counterclaim about, and that because it's to do with your money, and it's to do with everybody else also being affected by all the bonds that went on, which have to be redeemed. You want to redeem all the currency of the monies that was spent wrongfully with that. And that can come back into your account if you write this way. So you're writing it as an adverse counterclaim. And you have just said it's an acceptance, perfect, that you set charges off on consideration of proof of claim. How beautiful. Because you can do this, you see, in the private. But you cannot do this in the public. Yeah, that's right. Because you're going to get run into by someone using some code on you, and you're only looked upon under a dead man statute, and someone's taking things away from you. So if those are things which have been going on for you, it's evidentiary. You see, the fraud is evidentiary, and there's a reason why, which we can talk about. But so it's an adverse claim, and that's what you've just said. And this has to go directly to the agent. You see this? And who's that?
Okay.
Well, that's somebody who probated or was directly involved in probating your property, meaning taking your property away and giving it to someone else. Um, and So who did that? Because what authority did they have? You see, because this is the issue. Because you didn't really, or anyone, care for any account to be closed, no matter what the issue was. If that was based upon someone who ran over you, and there wasn't really any acceptance that was given, that was upon proof of a claim that you had where you were about something, right? So because discovery didn't exist, how could how could the claim have been settled? Because if somebody really can, then you're asking in this letter, of course, please sign off on this. That's right, because you can. Why? Because you've got an administrative process of security, which is all the bonds that existed there. And how did that happen? It happened by people properly doing their process. That's the security, but it also translates to monies down the road, which people who have invested in, and that's the securities of it, because it really is, in fact, and it should be listed more as a security versus, oh, these are just worthless, bundleless notes, and no botherers. We'll just do a pocket judgment on this bloke or woman, and she was out a penny late, a day late, and though she's got $300,000 or something into whatever, she's lost the whole plot, lost it, you see. So somebody took over, and that's wrong, and that collateral is really owned more by real people like you or I. That's what I was saying, not a corporation. And so what's federal in anybody's mind, none of that has any monopolization on what this process is. But laws existed that it's possible for you to be given consideration that you can set things off yourself because they can, you can, and that's when you're saying, hey, I'm giving an acceptance upon consideration, and that's the consideration. And what's the consideration? You can pay the tax on the ill gain or whatever, but you can insure people. You've just said that, and so now is there any issue there? No, there isn't. You see, not about that. There could be issues that relate to the fraud, but this is another. The intention, part of it, or anything else, is something else, and also resolving whatever it was in the process is a tort itself. But it all could be, brought into your own claim, and there's a way for someone to do that. And so if they could pay attention to this work, it's possible for them to learn more how you can do this. So we just said that, the idea that you can set something off just as someone else did, because there's no monopoly that exists on that, and because these are things that's private and not in the public, a monopoly does exist as it grows. That people, it's been given a service more and more and more, and it's sort of a modern day form of slavery. But because everything went on, you have a redemption, and because some fraud was evident, and meaning you can redeem value from what that incidence was, and so that your piece of paper, in fact, this one piece of paper, and what you did as a process was for you to be able to let people know that you're interested in redeeming value from all that was spent, and that should be brought back to you, and it can come into your account to become currencies of exchange, you see. So it's because somebody learns how to put a maritime lien on the infraction at the county recorder, and if one has a UCC1, one can make a UCC1 filing if they wanted to. But you're basic that you've got a maritime lien, and you went down to the county recorders and you did that, and that's prepared, and you've you eventually file this, with the county clerk recorders, you see. And so you're getting a stamp, you're getting things, and it shows that you're the creditor, and that you care for, but haven't been given proper full disclosure about anything, and that you're looking at the matter as some nature more that some deception has occurred or something unconscionable. So where the state is, you can have an affidavit of service and you attach that to the maritime lien that you got. You're putting whatever number it is that identifies you as the principal, and you're offsetting the things that went on about any infraction in this one piece of paper connected to this other piece of paper that we just talked about there, and that's a perfect rebuttal. You're really noting that you haven't abandoned anything. You're present to actually have paid everything off, so the charges are dismissed and discharged, and so and it's because somewhere there maybe you said I reserved all my rights. Somebody was stepped over about it, but you've got a right, as we're talking, to discharge all the charges in the private and to discharge the charges and release whatever the bonds are, so that for the purpose of them being able to be redeemed. So in the background, I'm giving you a little picture about what goes on where a process of like a court is, or where a building is being built, or the community is doing something and some bonds need to be created. And there's always a bid and a performance and a payment in these three sorts of bonds. And those bonds all have to be created because there's some transference of currency going on, whether that's a traffic ticket or whether that's any violation or anything going on, which is a charge, and that system is that because you are the principal, and are you going to get your credit from that or no? Now, most people are not going to get their credit from that because they've never heard about what this is, and so that comes up for grabs. Someone else is going to jump on that, and these are kinds of things that's being traded on the internet, in the stock market. And so small incidents of something which in the background there, something went on which said you'd abandoned these things when you didn't even know those existed. It wasn't transparent to you. Contract can only be because things are transparent to you. And out of some pocket judgment that went on, somebody lost all their equity where something was. And this, like what we're talking about, then this fits for you, really, like what we're talking about. Eventually, of course, somebody could have an administrative counsel, and then the grand jury foreman is the one who's the drawer and the maker of the indictment, meaning it's with her or his autograph that makes something into a true bill, and that's then forwarded to the bureau, of the Legislative Council to put into the system, and it's given to whoever you're paying, and that could be the court or somebody, and that's the drawee, or with paperwork that you've done, you just did it yourself. You've got this one page, and you did this, and you've learned how to turn the paperwork of itself into a check that you received. And it can be very simple for you to do. You don't have to do anything else.
Cha-ching.
So you could just get a copy of whatever that is, and you can turn that into a check, you see. So this one page just has a few small things like what we've just talked about, that's all. But the issue that we've also been talking about to our audience is how something could be going on behind the scene first, which can truly, you and I, take care to influence public policy by having administrative councils set up under Article 3, Article 4 courts where a procedure exists for people to be able to examine stuff and put something forward to the legislation. So things could be made to help protect things, you see, because otherwise you've got all sorts of derivatives, meaning a future where someone's going to get paid out with something that they bought because it has a maturity. So if a pocket judgment on some claim or anything would be just something that really was pretty simple, but the more that it involves your life, the possibility, the longer that the issues would go on and be unpaid. And most of these things aren't paid up and don't get paid off and goes longer than 9 months and comes under laws which should be being protected, where a real living being is behind such. And if because of validity and because of your verifiedness on a certain level. And so under Article 1 or Article 2 courts, which is two courts are mixtures of commercial sorts of code stuff with common but colouring of vice admiralty, and one doesn't have a right more or less where that is. But if somebody was operating there behind the scene and you didn't know what the subject matter was and this sort of thing, this claim, this process, which what I'm talking about right now, is meant for you. And personally, I say it's meant for a lot of people, honest. It really is.
I can imagine.
Yes, because the issues of the bonds require Article 8, because a lot of them can go past 9 months, and certain that Article 4 and Article 3 are things which govern lots of these securities, because those notes, they seem worthless. Nobody thinks about it like that, but it's true that that's a contraband. And so you're basically with one page saying, look, there's contraband that's existed, something is being unsold, you're looking at that. Now, if you didn't look at it, what happened? You didn't stand up for that right. And why shouldn't you? The government's given you every capacity to be able to uphold what your right is, and this is your quorum sensing where something is. And if you're not doing that, this is part of this circumstance. And where's the enemy? The enemy is really ourselves, where somebody could be more aware of everything. But in the meantime, could things be to help protect people where they are? Those are things which, the issues is about. And the trust that's used to do it all is through the Sister K, which everybody really is only a beneficiary there. And that's what the trust is about. You as a beneficiary to get access to be able to set things off that relate to your public account. And that connects to your private account, which is your Federal Reserve Bank. And so it's that you're an asset holder, on the private side, and exemption is necessary for you to be able to discharge a debt, which you have a right to, and you can control then the accrualness of the accounting, and that you've got credit, and you can apply towards a debit, you see. Otherwise, you've got trust set up that's taken things away from people, like in a democracy, which is like their prison reality trust, for instance, and that all the real estate that's traded, and because no tax is involved where that is, because it's said that it's abandoned, and because you're not a taxpayer, you don't have to pay that tax, but corporates would. They're making a lot of profit of it. But if they've just said it's abandoned, you don't have to pay tax. So it appears as if it's non-taxable. And so that's the issue. When you're settling something, you're saying to anybody, look, I'm going to pay the tax for you. And that's given value. You're given value, you see. So you're giving value for consideration upon proof of claim. And that's what you're doing very nicely. It's a counterclaim, and where something goes on, there's some 30 days which has to be sort of resolved where something that is. It's sort of a presentment, and where the notes have to be looked at, and it's more where something was where a secret maritime was going on behind the scene. You didn't know that. Well, one needs to get a maritime lien and have this counterclaim and address it up, so that the facts can be addressed, like what we're talking about. And you did it just with one page because you're understanding what the meaning of this is. You could look at any issue and you can see what's evidentiary fraud. What does that mean? It means that something already is present. Other things about it is to be proven, but it means that it's more probable, more likely that something does exist. And so where you've got judgments that's made more, in a decedent manner, lots of challenges could be to that for sure. But somebody could have, they could learn how to have a hold harmless indemnity insurance bond and this sort of thing, and they could use skill to learn how to come into the private more themselves. But ultimately, you're the owner of a perfected certificate of title, and because of it, you're the donor, no matter what. It comes to paying the tax, it's only you, the one who could pay that. And so, and as you should, because that's helpful where people are in helping resolve something, because where an omission of facts was, where misrepresentations were, like what we're talking about, where you weren't given consideration, you weren't given any service properly. You could have said, I've got a private postal, and everything that came in was a fraud because it didn't fit to be with that, you see? So these are issues which you've got, which is to do with omissions, you see. And if it's misleading where it was, you've got some obtained financial gain, like what we're talking about. Now you've got an adverse counterclaim, which is what we're saying. It affects a lot of people. They all bought into these bonds. They're supposed to be secure, not like suddenly, sorry, we've got to reverse it, we've got to redeem it, because it comes to be something which is not changeable, where something is apparent and changeable, it's got a lower value until it's more secure. But a lot of issues which people have, they're saying something secure about the whole thing when it really is not. And this is a serious violation. It must be brought up because it makes a claim which is adverse, because it affects a lot of people downstream. Something was made, like contraband is ill-got and passed on, and how do you correct that afterwards? It's like really incredible. You see, you must quickly fix something up like that so it's null and void, and actually be given back your property and be in the fullness of itself. And this, which is a scheme out there, otherwise somebody really didn't have proper integrity, where any judicial process was, you could really see that fraud can be just being subverting with the people. And somebody going to say that's not so? Yes, it is. It's a constituted fraud. It is about contraband. So now, where you look at issues like that, which is the issue, you're looking at things to be the nature of things, not cause and effect at all. You're dealing with the nature of things. And do you and I, we have a right to do this? Absolutely. This is the problem, that you haven't. You see, and that's fraud because you didn't, because under the Sixth Amendment, you have a right to be able to protect yourself. And so it doesn't establish, like what we were saying, where some deliberate knowing was, or any concealment. Somebody is an agent, where fraud is evidentiary as under a statute, like a dead man process. You're putting bills of exchange forward, meaning, bills that could go from one department to another, or you can do more personal notes and things. But somebody can give notice, of course, that they first are private national. And you can put this up the top of your page. And it could have been not noted before, and you're saying, please note this now. And it's something which I thought I was getting a benefit before, but I didn't. I'm giving you fair warning. And you're correcting stuff that you're a private national. Okay. And did you give? You didn't. You didn't give permission to for what went on, and you care to settle what the assets are that you have, which is in the private, not a public affair. It was for you, as you are. Could somebody say that you're not accused as being the actual secured party, which you are? You see, you can't be just a corporate person held to something and be okay about someone saying you have to wear your nose to the left for the rest of your life. So you've got a rightful, acquired, perfected title, and you're the owner, and you don't have to have that in your hand. Somebody would have to have a claim to say that you're not. You'd have to see that. Otherwise, to have said what this is done deal. You've got adverse property possession, like what we're talking about, which is to do with the issue itself, and that must be resolved. And it's an adverse counterclaim, like we said, one piece of paper, and you clear all things up for your own self. And it's a notice you're giving of that adverse claim, which is your counterclaim. And so, how simple is it? It's so credible, please. It's like, if you haven't thought about things like this, it's like, how does money mechanics work at the courthouse? You must understand that, like what I'm sharing with you. You're the principal of the matter. And there's only, on the private side, credit which you have, or debt, and it's what your choice was, or what somebody else did to you. If they took your right away to call you a decedent, and they're just dealing with it under a dead man statute, but a lot of the things, like we said, couldn't have proper validation to satisfy being a security. And so this is the problem which has come up a lot. It's huge. It means that you've got a lot of investedness and currency, which really doesn't have any soundness behind it. And it was more by fraud. And that's why it's important people step up to the plate more. But you definitely do have an adverse counterclaim. You should really learn how to put that together for yourself, learn how to do something, and get somebody more who can assist to help you where this is, like understand more your private right. But it's really knowing that a financial asset really is of an interest that you have, and where some transferal was and an agent was existed, and that was below. That wasn't a proper chain of command. And so for you or anything to have knowledge of an event which you see could fraud be, well, fraud sure is, and tax evasion too, because people can be doing that and not having paid the tax off it. But corporate monies is being made, and they're supposed to be such, but, for those corporations, and they're getting away with your tax deduction, which is, like I said, you're paying that for them because you can, and that's what the consideration that you're giving when you're giving a private, transference. So one can have, if you're thinking about it, this is like a security certificate, which has a date itself in all your paperwork as notes comes to be bundled and comes to be, but you've got a redemption within that, and for the exchange of all things that exist that's rightfully yours, and to be able to collect that and to have surrendered and discharged the charges that exist about such, and dismiss the charges, of course, discharge them. So that's what your paperwork says, and you've given them an ability to do that, and you've given this to the court, and you did that. Like if you listen to the work before this, you've got a right to appoint somebody. No one else does, because you're the donor. Someone else could be a donee, and you can select who that person is that you pass that on to. But basically, look, there's a lot of, something could be negligent, something could be abusive on levels, degrees of fraud and intention, and it can be just misconduct because it was like the distinction where somebody did something which is a violation, of course, because it's evidentiary fraud on its face, but it was done under some positive conditions versus was really meant to harm you. You see, so those are issues which just relate to the intention or something, but it doesn't mean that by the process that you've seen, the fraud is evidentiary, and so by the nature of what that is, the case should be dismissed, and you can ask to take judicial note. And so you've just said this in questions that you've asked in an interrogatory, and you've said this, and this is your private remedy. It comes to you having an abstract, which is, there you go, you've got their instrument, you turn this into a check and you've learned how to do that. And so basically, in a nutshell, it was said that somewhere there, some abandonment was, some writ came in and butted up against what rights that you had, and somebody moved to have terminated what your rights were, and they or whoever did that would have had to prove how that abandonment took place and how the burden that wasn't met under some dead man statute, and how did that end up as some security. See, you've really got an issue there, and it's got a quick smart get corrected, because you've got embezzlement, basically, underneath all of this one letter, it's saying, hey, there's a probable, there is embezzlement. It's deliberate. It could be an act of omission, you see, and that's truly disastrous, honest. You can't have impersonation of another. You can't have acts and things that's gone on that was just a pocket bloody judgment and took all your property away, your kids, anybody, your life, under a dead man statute. That's wrong. Why shouldn't that be corrected? Why shouldn't you and I correct this?
Okay.
And is this you not functioning properly? It sure is you functioning properly. Personally, if you're not doing this, you're not functioning proper.
Yeah.
But the principle really of the matter is, like we're talking about here, is you're the donor, you're the one who can actually give an agent the ability to be able to set the tax off. No one else can do that, so that must show you who's in charge where that is. Could someone have just taken over your will? Well, that's not right. It's really the act of the donation, which is shown. If you look and read it, you can see the presupposition means that you're gifting that to the state. So if you're gifting it, who does that mean? What does that mean? It means you're the principal, you see. So these things which is in the private could have never been said to you, and everybody just looks at documents and thinks, well, these are accounting terms. How do I fit where that is, you see? So that's something which somebody comes to learn. And someone would say, oh, well, you don't do anything with your life. It's like, oh, my God, please, you've got plenty of things that you could do. It's so amazing that you could learn from somebody who's got many thousands of hours behind something. But who has time to have thought and considered anything that's such like that? Everybody really has to have made a living. They've got to do things. And what time would you have to any spare to give yourself to others or even learn for yourself? Yes? It must be extraordinary, honest. Extraordinary, but not. It's really simple. Keep it simple, very. Don't get bogged down where term is whatsoever. Because I said in this tape that you're not an abnegator. Of course you're not. You're an alms giver. You're giving alms more. And so you're coming forward, and this is the golden age more, where you have more unlimited conditioning for your own self. And this is positive inducted currency. And not a monopoly exists about it. It's just that shouldn't you and I and everybody form the administrative council and actually assist with government like you should, so people could then have their claims heard more? under Article 3 or Article 4 court like you're supposed to? Of course. And you're really assisting. You've got a right for appointment. You could use Form 56 like we talked about. And you're giving someone the power, you see, because you're the trustor and you're giving them the ability to be the trustor through you as the donee. And so, and then you're giving them your insurance number if you're listening from Australia or England and other places, or your social number and things, or your EIN. So fraud really is really on the side where what's ongoing, like in this picture, like we're talking about, really are all the bonds that was on-sold as goods, which really wasn't lawfully got. And you're looking at that picture. Why shouldn't you? That's what I'm asking people to do. And because you didn't, that's wrong. It's just, you're just letting something go on, and you've got a right to be able to settle something. And it's just costing the Treasury, costing the corps, costing all of us a massive fortune because you're not doing your job properly. But it is a fact that people can have not been told anything that's in the public. It doesn't appear, which is what's in private. But it behooves you to quick smart to learn more what your private remedy is. But shouldn't it all be helped to be cleared up? That's the question, you see? Yes?
Yes, sir.
I think it's really important that we would look at things more like this. And I think that, in a couple of things I could be thinking of, just like what could we think of to wrap things up. But you've basically got, if you took some notes, you've got a few things that you can say, and that's all you need to have said. And you can have written something from this. You don't have to cite anything, except you could say under the law, because what you've just said is what adds up. And how did you put it? Did you put it from your private self? Are you learning how to put things from your private self and not your public self? And so we, the people, it really is Article 3, Article 4 courts. Some things have to have a much higher sort of, under a statute, for instance, under the Uniform Commercial Code, which is like Article 6 and things, and Article 8 even, because you've got things which can no longer be negotiable instruments. It could be negotiated. If it's negotiable, it could be changed. Well, how can that be a security eventual? Because, it could change. There's no security within that. Look, this is the big thing going on right now, which must be corrected, that if you're listening, it's very important. You've got a remedy which you must use, very important, very effective in the implementation to help all of us, where the people really get things back, which is your check and balance. And where the authority really is like where the nature of the event is, above the cause and effect, a cause of action. And it's the nature of things which you glossed over and not considering, and that's the reason why you're not having success where you are in the court where you could, and even in life itself. And so between all the three branches of government, we're supposed to have separation of powers. But what happens when you've got double oath takers there and they're running between all these departments? You see, there's no separation of power where you have things that's like this. These are very deep issues which should be addressed, with an administrative council, which it should be. Now, if it's not addressed with an administrative council, it's a mess. It's war. It's war on you because your whole infrastructure is being attacked by someone else outside. They're all being all paid up to look at you and collapse your infrastructure. And can somebody say this is not what people have been taught here, to go somewhere else and collapse someone else's infrastructure? And so everybody's taught the same thing. Look, this is ridiculous. It's wrong. And all of it in the public, like what we're talking about, is under a dead man statute, which doesn't work. It doesn't figure. It's like you can't take a natural right away and think that this is going to be secure. It's worse. It's useless. It's wrong. That's the reason why everybody must have proper liberty. And you've got to care for people wherever anybody is. You can't be saying, you don't love the person. Jesus, you might not care for the behaviour, mate, but you've still to be loving and caring about who's there. And there's a way to go about things in proper litigatedness to advance your own interest rather than testifying against your own interest, and then you being just trundled as an infant decedent in a case where the nature is not disclosed, and that's the violation of the Sixth Amendment, which protects the securities and everything. But it's rife that it's not, and I can see in all the cases going on in the public at the moment, it's truly disastrous for those people because where an irrevocable trust exists, it's not possible for something domestic like that for you to be put underneath a dead man's statute. There's no fraud that could be evidentiary because it can't be entered in without your permission because your will in the private, you've done some things. But the testimony really could only be where it was by a third party of interest, not in interest, and who was for the decedent rather than... Now, could anybody say an oral argument, actually that was given where that was in a statement and stuff that could be admitted? No, it can't because it just came from a dead person. How the hell could that be? It can't. Only the presentment which was written or put could be examined. And look, these are really big, huge flaws, because you've got bribery, all kinds of things can go on. And that's the reason why that's supposed to be truly to a higher standard of things. And it's supposed to be not under an Article 1 or Article 2 sorts of courts, which are just civil courts. It's all about corporations instead. And that cannot be over the top of securities, which eventually becomes a negotiable, which is a negotiable, which eventually become a security. But in the time that it's negotiable, something negotiable about this, but it's going to become a security, but someone's right was taken away to get it, and nobody's going to say that's not a massive risk of Pandora Papers that exist, of a private, which people could look into, as many agents all can be, an alphabet soup land, all connected evermore, and for drug cartel and operatedness, and massive amounts of fentanyl and things all going not looked at. But what is it that the Pandora Papers certainly that really shows massive drug laundering operations and things, and everything going backdoor to a certain place, which is the smallest place, which actually is the most controllable place, and then making like $935 billion or more. That's noted, and that's way more money than even the military is getting. So what's going on in a very small office? You've got everybody really should follow the currency, and nobody's going to say that like a CB Cower type of condition doesn't exist. And if you're not controlling yourselves internally, you're going to be controlled on the outside. And this is sort of what's going on. Who controls where all of that is in alphabet soup land? It hasn't been you and I to our Ministry of Council, but the Senior Executive Council instead. And does any of us actually control that? No. You see? So couldn't people wake up to things? Maybe you need to listen to this tape a little more and listen to it a few times. But it's taken control where anything is, where currency is just being laundered and it's yours. And isn't that just equivalent to you finding in a small place, very old, massive amount of currency, or even 80,000 tons of fentanyl, which was seized, and what happened to where this is? That's billions and billions of dollars, and it's certainly enough toxin to kill just everybody in the United States, you see. So who's behind all the cartels and where the door is more? And it's just not quite right. How can it be right where it's such a monopolization that exists, which you could see, because someone has an advantage on the system which you haven't thought of to use yourself. Once you know how to do it yourself, it's like, oh, I see. So I will let it be after that. It's like, I mean, you're really, there's a controversy which anybody could say that if you're listening, you've had something that related to litigation and it led to your demise. I would certainly say that it was because there was some hearsay rule which was apparent to be admitted, but can't be because it was coming from some infant decedent role, but how it doesn't have any proper securities with it, where issues that relate to the nature of things, where you have a right, where it was really infringed upon. Most of these things can go on longer than what they should, and so the maturity comes to mature more as what those bonds were in these issues. If they were only all maturity, it was all done, and everything. 9 months passed by, it was all done. But these things all can often drag on way longer. They definitely do. They should be controlled more by proper levels of verifiedness, and that's what our show today very much has been about. I think if I wrap it up, just for saying something small, I mean, to protect the conditions, we first talked about an infant decedent estate, which hasn't been corrected, because you could correct this, because you could be the authenticated, perfected certificate of title holder and owner. You can say you're the owner right now, because you are, because who else could say that they have that position? They don't. And so you're protecting the estate, and we've been talking about what goes on where something was under a dead man's statute. You've got some infant decedent who's not capable and incapable of testifying, and then some confessed judgment that came from that. It's like, okay, a confessed judgment came from the dead. I mean, that doesn't make sense. You see, this is the reason why you have a counterclaim on it all. And you put it in the paperwork like we've talked about. It's really against the officers and things where some expression was of the trust, and it really against a proper decree like it should. And so it can be rendered correct. It should be in your favour versus the adversity toward your own self as a witness party. And under the nature really is the key. If you listen to this is the key. And we've been talking about not putting things under a dead man's statute where you are not accepting necessarily that because of the issue. Because afterwards, what's the incompetency that's an issue of a dead man statute as an infant decedent, having offered some points of view that came from you, and some confessed judgment comes to be because of it. You see, this is what's going on, and this really is degrees of fascism outright, where it is. And you don't think that that's what's moving along ever more with all these regulations and stuff? Yes, it is. And when you get your rights taken away, do they ever get put back? No. You have to sue to get those rights back.
Wow.
And why should that not be corrected? The process itself is fraudulent, like what we're talking about. Many aspects of it, because it's in the private, but a remedy exists. It's not in the public. There's a lot of things that really should be looked at. And if somebody could say, well, it's true that there's no proper monopoly, but basically it exists as a monopoly because somebody gets a big head start on the whole thing and you've got a way to do that. You learn about it, but somebody is far greater and they've done that more. And this is what the system of City Cowicon basically really is overall. You've got a private and a public self, and most people that are in the public are only being looked upon as corporates, just, an account.
Right.
You see?
Yeah.
In a matter. Yeah, okay. So anyway, you're giving a notice of an interrogatory. It's really a private acceptance upon the proof of claim, and it's always put confidential for consideration to discharge the charges of the bonds and redeem all of that through this private process that's offered you, and you say it like that. And it's really very important. Why? Well, because it engages all the people of the state where you are, and where you're the principal. And under the Sixth, Amendment, you've got these protective rights to have a proper process, and it's obvious that you didn't. Well and truly. Why? Well, because it was an omission of the nature of the cause of the action. And could somebody say that? Yes, they can. Most of the time, that's the fact of it. And, so it's not happening like it should under the law. And you've got, how could you know whatever the code was of some jurisdiction that was being used behind the scene when you never asked for that? You see? And so in this one letter, you've got everything put in one letter, smooth and simple. It's just one page. That's all. And inside that, because you've got evidentiary fraud, because you're talking about the nature of things, you have to talk about anything else? No, because this must be cleared up. You've got a counterclaim, like we talked about, an adverse one. You're the principal of the security and the bonds that were sold at the courthouse to deal with your matter. And it was all dealt with, and those bonds were put and listed that you had abandoned them. Now, will that make the maximal amount of money for all the people that jumped on it and did it? Yes, it does. Why? Because it's not settled, and it's got lots and lots of fees, all sorts of things that goes on. It doesn't end because the system existed for it to be set off, and it was purposely decided, hey, why should we let that be set off? We'll just mine this person's energy's coming out of their account. And that's what goes on. It must be stopped. That's called user fucking from the account. Right. And so this whole one page is, but presupposing that someone must release those bonds, because those bonds have to be for redemption's purpose. And it presupposes that must be so. And so, because what you've just done is, with your claim, one piece of paper, you got it all. Why shouldn't you? You've securitized with your claim, you've securitized a negotiable instrument that you've written up and drawn up, which is this one page. It presupposes, in fact, that all the rights where would existed there is reversed back to where you are as the claimant. And because in a circumstance where a lot of this is there was no harm, injury, cost, or damage that was done, and no claimant out there, and yet for a pocket judgment, you could have lost your estate, your life, when you are the real estate. So no crime really is if no crime was under common law procedure, how could it be under civic that you would accept it? No, you can't, because you could suddenly say, well, okay, I just realised this, sorry, I'm reserving all my rights, and I'm warning you now, okay? I thought I'd get a benefit in the past, but I see I didn't get any benefit. So now I'm letting you know I'm reserving all my rights. So we're bonds, and so somebody has to give you proper paper to yourself, like your private self. Otherwise, that's fraud. You've got so much protection, which you should. And basically, I guess the message to everyone who's been listening is that most people have an adverse counterclaim, and why shouldn't you put it as such? Because something that existed under a very low-ball jurisdiction to verify the matters that went on was an Article 1 or Article 2, and it was like under a dead man statute, like an infant decedent. That's what you were only relegated to. So to wrap it up, of course, don't be frightened by the words that, like, under a dead man statute. That just means that you were only related as a fiction, as a corpse, as an account.
Oh, okay.
But you can't be, and you've got a right to look at the nature of things. And so, because words don't let it frighten you, securitization, what does the hell does that mean? It means that You're just making what's gone on into monies for your own self, and you want to make sure that you get paid for it, because why shouldn't you? This is really a bothersome error, and you're creating the currency for your own self to get paid back, and it comes back into your bank account to become real monies of exchange. And so it's all this is regulated, and then you can just put in brackets like Article 7, for instance, of the UCC. Anybody giving them notice, okay, well, you can look and see where the offset is good, and articles that are under for recoupment and things, okay, under law, and then you can put in brackets UCC FAS 133. That's in brackets, okay. Just put in brackets because that's the law. But you didn't have to say that if you don't want to. You just say, hey, please, this offset really relates to articles that's put before you here that's for recoupment. And it's you do an equitable action in common law, okay? And then what is the meaning of that? You've got a set off right. Of course you have, okay? And so in brackets you could put FAS 140, because that's what they'd have to go to learn, under Uniform Commercial Code, how to do that. It's you're learning that everything that exists around you, or if it's an IOU, it's an asset, it's an instrument, it's a liability instrument. It's not a liability instrument. Most people will think it's a liability instrument, and it's not. An IOU is something that is to be paid and will be got paid up. You see, you have to look into the matter of what the money mechanics behind things, but redemption, basically, in this one page, you've got everything there. You've got your private natural right as a national, and you're the one who's undersigned as the principal, and you're in the matter in rem, meaning, hey, there's some property, I'm defending it. It's about the thing. That's what in rem means. And so it isn't really about a payment, except that it's a transaction which is accepted, and something colorable that came along that was publicly done to someone, and it wasn't paid off, yet you've got a right to use a private remedy like we're talking about to have cleared everything up, all right? So you're bringing a claim, and it's a real property in interest. You're the principal of the property in interest. So words like this shows straight up, I'm sorry, somebody else that's reading it, they're not part of what that is. And why should you not put things that way, like it adds up in a JC Quanta? So if you don't carry it as a payable, and that it is on the books, one didn't think about things like this and so abandon it. Yet it should be wise that you have used this process to write that off and sell whatever gain the regained credit that comes to be recoupment under the Uniform Commercial Code, various things like UCC 3305 and UCC 3306. And I'm saying those things very quick. Why? Because some people are frightened by the use of words just so quickly. I said, if you wanted and you were writing a paper, I just gave you the laws, good. Put them in brackets because, hey, shouldn't it be just that you're just making sense to someone you're talking with? Yes? Okay. And I think that ultimately that's truly where everyone should be. Because what really happens where that securitization is on that negotiable instrument, like what we're talking about, and you haven't signed your rights away, you've reserved all your rights, you're asking for the claimant as a claimant, and if the claimant existed, that was a third party, where there really was no actual harm, injury, cost, or damage, there's no crime going on there, and you don't you have a right to this defence unless you cite you want common law venue. You have a right for venue. This letter says it. It straight up says I have a right for venue to then be considering what the jurisdiction is and how your subject matter is and the way you're looking at things. So because no crime is under common law because there was no harm, injury, cost or damage, shouldn't you have a common law procedure? Yes, you can. You can ask for that, and you've done it just by settling the matter with one letter. So you didn't have to go anywhere. You didn't have to do anything. You could speak it to someone. You could help someone. You've learned things enough about various areas of accounting and trust law, commercial law, and common law. You know how all those things merge where the court is and things, so you can't sort of be tricked. But most people, they're going to get tricked a lot. And isn't it that where jurisdiction matter cannot not be known to you, was that part of the issue where things were for you? Yes, it is. So why shouldn't it be just put like into one letter? All of this presupposed. You only need one letter. And because don't be a paper terrorist about things. You don't have to be. And most everybody is. Why? Because all their stuff is about the cause of action. Look what's happening to the president. Look what's happening to any of these people. Look what's happening to the past people. You know, that in the public you'll see. Yeah, you have I have a right to the offset, and that's what this process does. All right, you have a right to the offset, and you can learn where those laws are. You know, in the Uniform Commercial Code under FAS 140, for instance, you've got a set off. You've got the IOU there. You've got various things you could read more, learn more, and you can see you have a right. And what I'm sharing with you is very powerful. You have a private remedies that you should pay attention to because you're the principal NREM. You have the ability to be able to have paid off those charges. All right? Okay. So
sounds good.
I know that the information is more specialized because it really is more for people who are looking to resolve a claim. But aren't all of us, just if you listen to this, it's important that you could come to understand something. Maybe you need to listen to this 2 or 3, 4 times so that it comes to be off your tongue yourself. Yes? And if someone needs some assistance, they can connect in with you. All right? And a family and group of people all care very much that somebody can be received as some help where they are, where you are. All right? Yes?
Yes.
All right, mate. Okay. So anyway, look, really look forward for us to catch up to each other, do another show coming up. Yeah. Yeah. So you'll listen to this. Those of you really truly sit back and relax. Don't think you have to grasp something or anything. Maybe if you're interested, you made some few notes, and from it, honest to God, you can have one page, and the whole thing presupposes everything. And another part of it is just the bill that you paid, and you use the paperwork that was given to you to do that. Okay? Yeah. So that's what this process is about. All right? Good job, mate. Love you, mate. We'll catch up to you, Lucy. Catch up to everybody. Love you, mate.
Have a great night. Bye.
Bye, mate.